Number 27. Is the NIV the closest translation to the original manuscripts? What other translations are recommended? The NIV, I wouldn't say that it is the closest translation to the original manuscripts. I think that that is kind of a selling point that the publicists of the NIV, publishers of the NIV want to say. Taking a look, here's the introduction to the NIV Study Bible, which, by the way, I use the NIV Study Bible. I like the NIV Study Bible. I like the notes in the NIV Study Bible. They're, in my opinion, I've seen that they're pretty good, pretty accurate. Any kind of study Bible that you use, understand that there is the Bible text and then there's the study notes. The Bible text is inspired by God. The study notes are written by man. And so if you read something in the inspired text, you don't really have a whole lot of leg to stand on to say, that's wrong. If you read something in the study notes that you don't like, you can feel free to say, man, what bozo wrote that? Okay? He's absolutely wrong. But then again, he might be right too, right? Okay, well, this is how the introduction to the NIV Study Bible starts out. It says, the New International Version of the Bible, NIV, is unsurpassed in accuracy, clarity, and literary grace. Okay, well, going back a page to the preface of the people who actually did the work, this is what they said. They said, like all translations of the Bible, made as they are by imperfect man, this one undoubtedly falls short of its goals. Okay, that sounds like a whole lot more humility than the other one, right? Okay, I don't necessarily think that the NIV is the closest translation to the original manuscripts, but I think that it is a good translation of the manuscripts. And when you talk about translation, you need to understand that there is not something that is, like word for word, all right? Here is, and Mike, you don't have to put this on YouTube because I don't even know where I got this, and I certainly don't know where to give credit to. I copied this many, many years ago, and so I have no idea. So we don't have to violate YouTube's copyright laws. But I ran across this chart many, many years ago. To tell you how long ago I ran across this chart, this was actually something that I pulled off the internet and printed on an overhead projector and showed people using an overhead projector, okay? And so that's how long ago I got it from. So it's just a little graphic that kind of gives a little bit of thought about, the different scopes of Bible translation these days. And on the one end, you've got word for word over here. And then on the other hand, you've got thought for thought. The word for word, if you were to take it to its end result, is going to be an interlinear. And if you've ever seen an interlinear, if you don't have an idea about, language in translation, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because if you look at an interlinear, you've got a Greek word and you've got the English word right underneath it, and you start to see that the way that things are phrased and the syntax of one language is not going to come across in English. Sometimes you can look at it and you can say, oh yeah, I see what it's talking about, and you can follow along. There's other times that you look at it and you think, I have no idea what it's saying. And you have to scramble and, put things into different words. And there's sometimes that you look at it and you say, why is the word "thee" there? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, okay? So, when you look at something that's an interlinear, that is going to be way word for word, but at the same time, it's really not going to make a whole lot of sense. On the other hand, you've got, and it doesn't really say this, but over here on this side, you've got a paraphrase. And so, I guess I'm putting this up here, but if you're watching on YouTube, this graphic is an arrow, and so way over on one side is interlinear, word for word. Way over on the other side is going to be a paraphrase. And then here is a lot of different translations that are there. That is going to be, kind of where at least the person that made this graphic, where they fall in that line. And so, for example, here he is, the King James right there. And so the King James is way over on the word for word side of things. But we've got actually a lot of different other translations that are even further of word to word, like, for example, the New American Standard, which is it's actually a translation that I like quite a bit. Okay. On the other hand, you go to, back the other way as far as thought for thought. You can have a thought for thought that's not really a paraphrase. You can translate, but in your translating, you're thinking, okay, in this translation, what is the most natural way that we can convey this into modern day English? And so you've got something like, for example, the Holman Christian Standard Version that's a little bit back from the King James. You've got the NIV that's kind of going back even more, kind of midway really, at least what this says. And then you've got something as far as the NLT, the New Living Translation, that's even going more thought for thought. When you start to get over here into this area, that's really getting into more of a paraphrase. When you start to get the bias of the translators into the translation, because they're thinking, what are these people thinking based on what they write, and how can we express that? Well, that's really getting more into it, right? And so the more word for word you've got, an advantage is that you've got something that is more direct, but it's harder to understand. The other way that you've got something easier to understand, but at a point you're going to really start to lose the original meanings and intents, and you're going to instead start to get the ideas of the translators. And so, as far as a graphic goes, it really just kind of depends on, where you're at, what you're doing. To me, I think if you're looking at kind of a big picture type things, and you're trying to look at a whole bunch of history about things, it's easier to go for something that's more of a, thought for thought, like the NIV, because you can start to get a bigger picture of things. But if you're looking at something that's going to be looking at, like a verse or two, and really start to examine different things and kind of analyze things grammatically, well, you might be better off going for something that was more word for word. All right? And so I hope that answers the question. I guess the question, the other part of it is, what other translations are recommended? Well, I mentioned a couple of those. New American Standard, I like to use those. Holman Christian Standard, I like to use those. NIV, I use that. King James, I've used that. And any of those four, as long as something is a translation, as long as, if you look at the points of the translators, if they're saying, this is God's word, we understand that it is God's infallible word, and we're trying to translate that, then you're probably on pretty good grounds. When you start to, get into something else where it's not really a translation, that's where you got to raise some red flags. Okay? All right. Any questions about that?